Intimate partner violence is exactly as it states. It is violence that exists between people who know each other. Typically, it's with partners who are involved in an intimate relationship. We usually tend to think of that in a sexual relationship. It does not require a sexual relationship, and it can be with people who had a prior sexual relationship or just people who are actually close to each other or share the same domicile. I want to be clear that it is primarily, as the definition states, violence between people who are intimate with each other. At the center of intimate partner violence is control and power. That's an important thing to recognize. So then you understand a little bit better different types of violence. So it can range from physical to sexual to emotional to financial. It really is about control. It's about power and control. I often sometimes hear some of the people who are victims I've come across have said things like, oh, he doesn't hit me, or so I'm fine. But, this person is subjected to verbal abuse continuously. They're minimized, made to feel inadequate. A situation where the partner controls the money and there's no freedom to make choices unless you actually ask that partner for an allowance or something of that sort. They control who you may speak with, who you see, how you go out. So all of these are forms of violence. And even something, when we say sexual, people usually think of forceful intercourse or something of the sort, but it could be subjecting someone to watching porn that they don't really feel comfortable with, or different types of sexual acts that they may not want to be involved with. Everyone is at risk. Interestingly enough, in general, the stats are 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men. It can be heterosexual or relationship with same sex. It could be old, young. There are certain populations that are at increased risk. I really want to emphasize that anyone is subject to it. And we want to go back again to a very well-known case from one of our own, who was an affluent member of the community who was unfortunately killed by her husband, who then killed himself. So it's important to recognize it crosses all lines. I think it's important that we recognize that as physicians and as surgeons, in particular trauma and acute care surgery, there's data that shows 46% of people who were victims who ended up dying had presented to the emergency department the year prior. So I think it is important that we recognize that this is something that affects all of us, affects society, and that we as surgeons we have a critical role in identifying and helping. And I say this because I gave grand rounds somewhere once, and one of my friends at the time came up to me afterwards and said, "You're a trauma surgeon, you sound like a social worker." And that's somebody who has really not gotten the message that it isn't about being a social worker. It is part of what we do in taking care of the whole patient. And thankfully, the college recognizes that.